joint deep down in my heart. I'm waking up with your love from the start. I'm chasing the rainbow through the rain. I know it's gonna be a beautiful day.
Strong, independent, smart, powerful, alpha, fearless, tough. These are the words often used by today's society to define real men. They're all great words, but on today's show, we've invited some guests who believe the list is missing a few important words. You might be surprised at what they have to say. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee, Conversations of Friends of Faith to encourage and equip. I'm Kim Crabill, your host. It's an honor for me to welcome on today's show 3 men who lead the men's portion of our ministry. They are well acquainted with the words our culture uses to define real men. But they can't help but ask themselves, is there something missing from our list? Today, we want to welcome you guys and thank you so much for being a part of our show. And well, this is a big subject. But before we get into that, take a minute and introduce yourselves to our friends.
Hi, my name is Chad Steele. I'm the Senior Vice President of Public and Community Relations for the Baltimore Ravens. But more importantly, my lovely wife, Wendy, and I have 2 kids, Dylan and Colt.
Great, thanks, Chad.
I'm Miss Kim.
Hi.
Casey Gomes. I'm the president and founder of Parents Inspire Consulting Company, an entrepreneur and book author, and very similar, proud husband to my wife, Rami, and we have two children, a 10-year-old son and 8-year-old daughter, Bailey and Eliana.
Welcome. Thanks for coming.
And I'm Yale Spector. I'm an attorney with my own law firm, and I am a proud husband of my wife, Elaine, and 3 beautiful kids, Noah, Alex, and Olivia.
Well, thank you. I know you're very busy, and I know you have lots of things going on, but I also love the heart that you have to reach out and expand what our culture is thinking about the men and their role. So let's just start there. You know, we've done a Bible study together, and I'm just going to throw it at you. We did the Bible study. What did you learn?
You know, I think for me, it was just how we talked about, you talked about the words that society uses for men, and we learned, I think, as a group, how you can introduce that vulnerability. You can introduce being open and being honest with each other, and as professionals and as men, us being able to do that in that group setting was amazing to me.
How was it amazing? I mean, I think of the word freeing so much, you know, and this is such a hard topic for men, this vulnerability. So, I mean, how did that happen, and what did it mean to you? I think
it's acknowledging the whole thing, right? So you mentioned, and we've talked about before, the brown bag burdens that we carry, and we mentioned as men that we feel like we have that brown bag, but we pack it into an armored suitcase, you know, and we're not encouraged to open it. And opening it takes a lot of courage and strength, and when you do, it's a big relief when you can share some of those burdens and those weaknesses. But it's also to say, it's okay. Those other words you said at the start of this are good words. We agree with those words. Yes. It's okay to identify with them as a man and to want to live that way. But it's also really important. An important word that Chad uses, vulnerability, to be able to be authentic and vulnerable and kind, and be willing to show that side of yourself too. It really brings a balance that's important, I think, for us as men to acknowledge with one another.
Yeah. So authenticity is a word that you would definitely add to that list.
For sure. And I think the word, like when we express that feeling of being free, I think, including myself, I think all men out there have this deep desire to be known, really. And unfortunately, we don't get that opportunity, and we don't give ourselves that opportunity. And so that freeing feeling that we have and that the other men in our group had was because we want to be known. We want to be deeply understood at the very basic level. And so that's the freedom that we get when we start being vulnerable and we start opening up to people, especially other men.
I hear it so often, but they won't talk to me. Men won't talk. So how does this happen? How do we create, is it creating a space? Is it a comfort? What is it that would help men see what you all have experienced?
I think it is creating a space for that, but it's also someone has to take that step, because in our group there were some of us knew each other, some of us didn't, and I don't know what's harder, being vulnerable in front of someone you know or someone you don't know. So creating that space, and once one person took that step, you say, oh, it's okay, and then it just became a room full of love, and we could all do it together, take those steps together.
And we use the Bible too. I mean, that's an important part of that. Using God's grace and God's wisdom and the words of the book to guide those conversations is humbling and grounding, and doing it in a way that, like we said, acknowledging that, you know, we all strive to be perfect, but we don't have to have this projected aura that we are perfect. And I think when you're willing, to Chad's point, to take the risk and lower that aura down, and just be real and say, look, I'm strong and I'm successful, but I'm also weak and I'm flawed, and all of those things are part of what make us truly ourselves. It takes some courage initially to kind of drop that down and to be willing to go there.
Right. And a lot of it also comes with, you know, what's the big blocks for vulnerability. And I think for me, what I've learned through the group and through other groups is, you know, we carry pride and we carry fear. Pride that we want to be men and we want to be extolled as men and successful. And we also have a fear of people really knowing that we have weaknesses and there's a chink in our armor somewhere. And so those two things that we battle against prevent us from opening up. And so when we recognize that, and also I think in my own personal thing, I know that like in a lot of men, and I think out there, we don't get a chance really to embrace and experience loss, whether it be a loss of a loved one or a loss of a job. We don't get to experience that. We're always taught you got to muscle through, pull through, and not really experience what it feels like to lose something and to acknowledge the loss. That was my personal journey. And so I think for me is getting men to dig deep. Like, why? Why don't I want to be vulnerable? Vulnerable has this connotation of, when you hear the word vulnerable, you hear, oh, I'm cooked. My goose is cooked. I'm vulnerable. But really, vulnerable is a beautiful word, and you can have strength in your vulnerability. And so what I would recommend to men is that you embrace that. You can say to someone, look, I need to talk. Can you listen to me, or can I trust you with this information? Just because you want to be vulnerable doesn't necessarily have to lose control of your story or of your pain.
Well, as a matter of fact, I almost feel like that's where control is found.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think it's a little bit of the unknown. It's a little bit of a fear of the unknown, and when you feel like you're vulnerable, it's a sign of weakness. But then once I see that strength and the vulnerability in Casey and in Yale and in the other people in our study, it kind of made me take another step forward and another step forward. And you know, when we started, you and I had talked about this for a long time, and when we started it, and you know, I was able to ask people to join. You were able to ask people to join. I didn't expect all of what it became. You know, I was going to go in there and I wanted to study a little bit of the Bible and have a little bit of fellowship, but the bond that we all shared through our shared vulnerability was huge.
Talk about that bond, because I think that's what men long for as much as we as women do, and I don't even think that you understand what's missing until you truly have it. Does that make sense? Would you say that?
I feel like once someone's willing to take that risk, then it was just everyone. It was open season, I think, and it was also funny. Like, I feel like we had a lot of. I mean,
oh my gosh.
Being able to laugh at our imperfections and our stumbles was also a ton of fun. But then also being able to hear, you know, we talked. I don't want to share stuff from the group that wasn't mine, but you know, some of the struggles I know I shared was my wife and I lost a child, and being able to have other men in the group that I really looked up to and respect be like, I went through that exact same thing, and the inadequacy I felt as a husband trying to support her and feeling like I was totally falling short and couldn't help, you know. That's something that I had bottled up for a long time, and it wasn't until I released that I got this gift back of other men, and instantly saying, I went through the same thing, man. Like, it was super hard for me, and I totally know what you went through. And that it's incredibly empowering to have that type of thing come out in a relationship. In some cases, very early on. You know, some of us, you know, didn't know each other that long.
And I think now we have that, and we have a text chain, and so there's a song or a scripture or a TV show that we'll see and we'll share with the group, and inevitably on that text chain, someone, man, I really needed this today. Yep. You know, I was thinking about this, or I was having a rough day and I really needed this. And I think that's the cool thing, that it extends beyond just our time together.
Mm-hmm. That's what I like and wanted to talk about, is that you had the time, the 8 weeks, right? 8 weeks, every Monday night, 2 hours, and the depth of the conversation, the depth of the friendship and the bonding evidently was so strong that you weren't willing to give it up. Mm-hmm. It's extended through the text and...
Mm-hmm. That's right. And you know, as a backdrop, a lot of the 8 of us, we really didn't know each other intimately or deeply or long. I mean, it wasn't like we had deep friendships where we knew each other from grade school. Yeah. A lot of us came in just introducing each other for the very first time. So, you know, the message there was, for me, it's, you don't know where you can find that opening. You don't know. You could be walking with a friend for years and years and years, not really know him, but you could meet someone and all of a sudden there's this instant bond. So you don't know where it's going to be, and thank God for us, I think we found in our group just an immediate bond.
Were you all surprised by the one person, I think probably everyone felt this, but one person said, I don't know that I would have survived what I'm going through without you all by my side. Now that's powerful words. Yeah. And it makes me think about the people who are struggling to that depth now, and they don't have what you all have found. And I think that's where our heart is going in this show and the other things that we're trying to build.
Well, I think we've all been at that point, and luckily we got through it without the group, but I just think about how much easier it would have been if I had the group, and now so thankful that we were able to be there for him and to be able to help him through that. And so for me, you know, when he said that to us, that was really emotional for me, because it's like, oh my gosh, okay, something that we had thought about, hey, maybe we can do this, and we finally kind of cobbled it together, and then to have that outcome and have him be so involved and us to help him through something like that is really, really special.
Do you ever wonder, what if we hadn't? You know, what if we hadn't? You know, I mean, just the opportunity to be a part of someone's life that you really felt like you really mattered. I mean, your words and your presence, and I mean, that's really what we all want to do, is right, to really matter.
I think we also took a personal accountability for each other. We hurt when each other hurt, and I think when we stumbled, and you know, we're living life out, and so if one of us is stumbling or in a pinch, you know, we take responsibility for that. We take our heart. That's our heart breaking when that happens. And so if you hear one of us that, you know, is going through some difficulty, you know, we hurt. And so I think that bond wouldn't have happened unless we had our group together and we went through the process of being vulnerable, opening up with each other and exposing us for what we are.
Let me ask you a question. Going through the group and getting to know one another at such a deeper level, how has that affected you as a husband and as a father?
I think for me, well, I mean, the short term and then longer term. Short term during the group, I think Chad and I joked about this prior to and during. You have those days where you're just fried. You know, like you come home and work was stressful or just took everything out of you. And I always look forward to coming home to my family, but I don't always feel like my tank is full. Like I want to be the dad that's like, hey, let's wrestle on the floor, kids, or let's do something fun. But there are times where I'm just, you know, I'm just spent. And I think for me, feeling like I had an outlet to kind of balance myself back out, particularly short term, I noticed right away that I just felt like my energy was higher, and it's just because I had an outlet and an emotional. It was an outlet, but then also getting the emotion kind of back. My tank was getting full in that way that I just felt in better balance. And I think since then, obviously, the continuation of the group and our friendships has really helped that, because we do have the outlet. But also, just I mentioned to you then that I felt like I was strong in my faith, but I hadn't connected with the Bible and a conversation with God at a level that I do now. And I feel like it was really And that part was really important for me, to be able to sit around with a group of guys and have those conversations and not feel like someone was judging me because I didn't have the verses memorized or I couldn't list the numbers that, you know, and I feel like I've gotten better with that. But that really helped. That's something that has sustained since then as well in terms of, you know, longer term impact for me.
Yeah. And I think I'm a visual learner, you know, so I learned, you know, how to hopefully be a good husband and a good father through my parents. And so being able to share with my wife and my kids, you know, hey, I can show you the right way to do things, and to be able to come home, and particularly with my son, you know, let him know we were there, we were in a group study, we were learning about the Bible, but we're also able to share, to open up, and to cry when we needed to, and that's okay. So being able to do that, and as Casey mentioned, when you go home and you're kind of filling up, and it's just it's a different approach to it, and I think that's really impactful, especially to the families as we go through this.
And from a married man perspective too, I mean, it's comforting for your wife to know that you're doing life with some other men. And
based on the Bible.
Based on the Bible.
Yes.
And that you're going out there and you know, my wife often asks, when are you going to see your men again? How are your men doing? So for her, that was a comfort to know that I was doing something that was bettering myself and coming back as a better husband and father. So it's a safety blanket for your spouse too, to know that you're walking with similar men in similar situations and similar desires.
Absolutely, and I think that there's no better, you know, women love security. That's our number one thing. We want security. When you have husbands who are in the Bible and they're reading and they're holding one another accountable, that is such a comforting thought to women. It's like that, you know that they're doing the right thing, they're striving to do the right thing, and if they fall down, they have someone to talk to, and it makes us feel better to know that you have a place to go and talk, because we worry about that. You know, we think about that a lot. We know that you're carrying heavy loads. We know that you're stressed. We see that you're trying to be all and above, and you know that worries us or causes us great trepidation. So for you to have that group is very soothing to us and gives us great security. As women, one of the things that we've noticed is we leave our group, that after being in a group where we're so vulnerable, is this the way it is with you? When we go out into the world, beyond even our families, we can pick up on hurt and pain a little bit easier in others. Is that the same with you all?
Yeah, it was. You said used a word with me personally, but you used it in general, the group of finding your ministry and knowing what your ministry is, and that we all have a ministry, and that concept, I don't want to say it was new to me, but I'd never thought of it that way before. That that moment that you might be hesitating. I think Yale had a story with this too, with a guy you had worked with for a long time, and Yale made the point of connecting with him on a different level as a result of that, to say like, are you okay? Or engaging someone in a conversation about God or about faith in the workplace or on a soccer field while you're watching your kids play is something that I wasn't afraid to do before, but I wouldn't have thought of myself as someone who was, able to do that. And now I feel like I can. I feel like in a non-judgmental way, being able to lock in and have that conversation with another guy and just seeing the results, having them lower their guard almost immediately to say like, oh, this isn't just a conversation about our jobs, which is a totally fine conversation to have, but like that kind of next level of oh wow, that just got real. That got real really, really quickly, and feeling permission to do that now.
Yeah, and I think what's, for me, sitting here just thinking about just now, I know that, and for real time, like right now, my wife and I struggle with being vulnerable with each other, especially me, empathizing. And I'm still horrible at it. But if I didn't have these guys where I've tested my vulnerability, and I can say, gosh, why am I not being vulnerable with my wife? I can be vulnerable with these guys. I can listen. I can open up. Why can't I do this at home with my children? Why can't I do this? And so, my prayer for myself is that I take what I've learned from this training session with the men and be able to take it home. And I'm living that now, currently. So it's an ongoing process, and but without it, I don't think I would have the capability on my own to recognize that I wasn't listening to my wife the way that she wanted to be listened to, or hearing my children the way they wanted to be heard unless I was able to go back and say, gosh, I gave it to someone else that doesn't live with me. Why can't I do that at home? And so for me, that's the power.
Yeah.
And I like what you said, learn, because we learned so much. But the great thing was, the first couple times you were in the room and you were kind of leading us, I could see you were like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? You know, it was because it's different. It was the first time you had done it, and you're like, oh man. But you learned, and you learning kind of, you helped lead us in the right direction, and hopefully that helped you. You know, with other people. And so then that's another thing that I kind of look at and take pride in, is like, okay, we helped ourselves and we can help the people in our lives, but hopefully we helped you.
Yes.
And then you can go out and minister to other people, and that's how it grows. It's, you know, 1 by 1 or 11 by 11 as we talked about.
Yes, absolutely. And it's so true. And I feel like that's one of the greatest things about life, is that you're always learning. I think we should always put ourselves in situations where we have to be stretched. Remember our rubber band? You know, rubber band can't fulfill its full potential unless it's being stretched. And you know, to me, that's the essence of life, is always learning and growing and putting yourself in those situations, even though they're difficult. So, if and I know that we have friends who are listening. We have wives that are thinking, oh, I really wish, you know, my husband was in a group like that. But I want you to speak more importantly to the men who are listening, that are feeling some of the things that you were feeling before, and we still feel, because we're all on this growth. I mean, what would you say to someone who's going, oh, that's just not for me? Because, you know, what would you say, because to get some of that pain and hurt out, where would you lead them?
I guess a couple of things. I think first, if you're someone that's not going through hurt, you mentioned 3 words in another session you did, but 3 powerful words of I love you are really important for us as men, I think, to be more generous with how often we use that. So if you're not going through hurt, then use those words a lot, and don't be afraid to use them with your brothers if you have them. I mean, I'm blessed to have 2 younger brothers I'm very close with, and we say I love you all the time. But we don't always say it to a guy that we're friends with, like I love you, I love you, I love your family, and I want the best for you. And so if you're not going through hurt, that's fine, good. That's a blessing from God right now. Use those 3 words proactively to someone who might need to hear it, especially another guy. And the first time is going to be hard, you know, if it's not someone you're related to, or maybe it is someone you're related to, but I would start there. And I think second, I would just challenge any guy that's watching, if there's someone you've been friends with or you're related to that you have a long-term relationship with that you haven't really gone there with, just try in the next couple weeks. You know, talk about something really personal that you haven't talked about before. Maybe it's something painful, or maybe it's a positive memory, I don't know, but just something that you've never really shared with them before. And it doesn't have to be hurt. It can be something else. But when you go to that spot, it changes you. It changes the relationship, and you'll feel better about yourself, I think.
And I think it's just taking that step, because there's no pressure. There's no pressure from any of us to come to this group. We just asked, and we said, you know what? I think there's the right thing. It's not like my son when I put broccoli on his plate, so you're going to eat that. It doesn't matter. You're going to eat that. You know, but it's just, hey, why don't you come in? Why don't you try? So I have friends that I've talked to, and at first they're kind of like, I don't know. And then the more and more you talk, it's okay. You know what, I'm willing to take that step. And I think that's the thing, because it's so inviting. And if someone comes in and they sit down and they talk, they say, this isn't for me, hey, no harm, no foul. I'm still going to love you. We're still going to be friends. But if it is something that can help you, think about how much better you're going to be for everyone around you just by taking that simple step.
Because you mentioned something, and I thought you were going in this direction. You went a different direction. But when you were talking about sharing and giving out, and you spoke about a lightness, you know, you do feel lighter, don't you? I mean, you really do kind of, the Bible tells us to bear one another's burdens. It's almost like being vulnerable enough to lay it out there and say, you know, this is what I'm dealing with, and you don't feel like you're carrying it all alone. All of a sudden you have friends who really care for you, that connect with you, and they start, you know that they're carrying that with you. That's
big, and I think that's like, and sometimes, you know, what's worked for me is there's something that's troubling me or something on my heart, and I might ask that question to someone else. So if I'm having difficulty with a certain situation, say, hey, how are you doing with X, Y, Z, for example? How's your relationship with your wife? Or and because that's a question on my heart. And so, you know, that sometimes opens up the door for somebody. You'll never know what the response is going to be. Yes. And somebody might say, oh, by the way, I'm having difficulty with And that way you start the conversation.
Absolutely.
He said something that I want to come back to, because Yale has showed courage in our group a few times, and you said something just a minute ago that I've been processing, which was you were vulnerable with our group, but you weren't at home. And I just think there's a lot of power in that statement. And I was thinking like, gosh, I'm the same way. And I would think if a guy's watching now, I think often we're the least vulnerable at home, because that's where we're supposed to be the head of the household, you know? And I'm totally guilty of that. And when you just said that, I'm like, yeah, that's part of it. It's not because I'm trying to be difficult. It's because I love them and I want to provide for them and I want to provide a home for them. But you're right. If I'm not processing that correctly, I'm forgetting that I'm allowed to go to my wife and should be going to my wife or even my kids sometimes and saying, gosh, Daddy had a really rough day today. You know, I'm beat.
Yeah.
You know, open yourself up. Whereas before, I probably wouldn't have done that. You know, I would have just been like, I'm fine. I'm home. We're good.
Right. But they know you're not fine.
Yeah, of course. Oh, yeah, right away.
And that causes all this worry. And that's what I was talking to you about with the security. You know, just the openness of how you really are just puts us at ease, even the children.
Yeah.
So, my goodness, we're already out. Can you believe we're already out of time? I mean,
Always goes by fast.
I know, it always does. So I just want to thank you. And from the people who are listening, I know that they would like to thank you for being the type of man that you are, strong and yet vulnerable, and opening yourself to show other people, you know, that it's okay. It's better than okay. It's really what God calls us to do, is be vulnerable. So guys, thank you so much. And I want to end with this note. You know, when we first started, I think it was Casey or Chad that mentioned about the brown paper bag. It was Casey, about the brown paper bag. And that's how we began the Burdens of Blessings Confront and Conquer study. We have this brown paper bag, and we talk about what would you put in the bag to eat for lunch. And then we turn that around in the study and we say, what is in the bag that's eating away at you? And that's a good starting place for you today. You know, we talked about where would you start? What would you do? Think about that. What is eating away at you? What keeps you up at night? What is your worry as the head of the household, as that big brother you're supposed to be, as that manly man that you are? You know, what we found out and what they have taught me and what the Bible teaches us is that when you can take that thing that you feel like is your weakness and put it out in front of you with others, then they help carry that, but it also strengthens you. It's crazy how it happens, but God says that He is our strength in our greatest weakness. So think about that. What would you have written on that piece of paper? What is that one thing that is just scaring you, worrying you, speaking badly to you, bullying you? That's a good start. Consider finding someone to go to and just say, can we grab some coffee? Because this has really been bothering me. I will guarantee you that as soon as you speak it and you begin to talk, you're going to go into a depth of friendship that you never knew possible. And you're going to have a new brother, whether by blood or just by friendship, that is going to be so connected with you from now on. And you will not want to lose that. So it's something to consider as we were talking about the new words, as these men have shared, that we can add to what real men look like. So all of those strong words are great, but add in a few words like vulnerability and authenticity also need to go in that category. So thank you so much for joining us today for coffee, and the men who joined us, and I hope that you'll join us back here again next week. Bye, everybody.